What's up, guys? My name is Robert Donaldson, and I'm back today bringing you all another NFL draft video, this time centered around Iowa defensive lineman Epenesa. And honestly, I'm really excited to talk about Epenesa, partly because of how polarizing he's been in the draft community. And also, I just think he's a pretty interesting player. And, given where he's being slotted and projected, he's definitely somebody worth talking about. For a little background, Epenesa attended high school at Edwardsville High School in Edwardsville, Illinois, and along with football, he threw shot put and discus and played basketball, which I think is pretty cool. I like seeing multi-sport athletes. Epenesa is also a second-generation Iowa football player. His father, Epi, is an Iowa legacy in his own right. That was an often talked about subject during his recruitment and during Iowa games over the past 3 years. At Iowa, AJ was obviously very productive. He recorded 26.5 sacks, 36 tackles for loss, 9 forced fumbles over a 3-year span, and in that same 3-year span, the Hawkeyes won 3 straight bowl games. At this year's combine, he measured in at 6'5", 275 pounds, and he didn't have one of the better showings at the event. It was kind of disappointing to some people. And he posted a 40 over 5 seconds, I think it was 5.04, and a 3-cone in the 7.3s. And that's where a lot of this polarization that I was talking about earlier seemingly stems from with him. And with that all being said, let's take a look at the film and see what Epenesa has to offer on the football field. Immediately what jumps out about Epenesa's game are his hands. Not only is he tactical with his hand usage, he's also just extremely violent with it. And let me tell you, nobody lining up across from him is ever going to want to mistime their punch or end up lunging, because if they do, it's legitimately going to hurt them, almost like getting your hands caught in a wood chipper. It's just not going to be fun. The first play we're going to be taking a look at here came against Minnesota in 2019, and the first thing we're going to notice is Minnesota's lined up in an empty with no tight end on the line of scrimmage, and that means barring an unlikely QB draw, it's going to be a pass, and Epenesa will be going up one-on-one with the left tackle with no additional protection to worry about. And the play starts off pretty standard, and the left tackle actually has a pretty decent pass set at first, but the second he looks to engage, he just starts to bend at the waist, and that's when you see Epenesa's inside arm just spring up, and it grabs that inside shoulder of the tackle. From here, Epenesa is going to pull that inside shoulder with his inside hand to send the tackle off balance, and then he's going to combo that with a violent club on that outside shoulder to get him even more off balance. Now, Epenesa is just going to rip through and make sure he pins that offensive tackle's back to ensure that he can't recover and he can't reset and he can't get back into play. And from there, Epenesa is just going to get a hit on the quarterback and disrupt the play. On this play, you see a few different things come into play. First off, you see his length on display. There's a reason why that tackle is bending at the hips like that in the first place. And you're also seeing that power when he initially pulls that shoulder rather, and immediately sends him off balance. You're also seeing that violence that I was talking about earlier on that club move, where it just comes down with so much force that you think that, there's going to be a dislocation or there's going to be like a broken bone or something, right? And this is how Epenesa makes up for some of that lack of bend that everybody wants to talk about, that lack of twitchiness. Usually this kind of move goes 1 and 2. But here, the shoulder pull and the club almost seemingly happen simultaneously. And that's a real credit to, one, quick technical hands, but then also a credit to Epenesa's extraordinary length. One of the things you have to address when you talk about Epenesa's game is the swipe and rip move. The swipe and rip is his signature pass rushing move, and it's undeniably the most effective tool in his bag. When you watch him perform it, you can clearly see the violence behind it, and his active hands are what make it work so well. The purpose of the swipe and rip is to clear through that blocker's hands away from the side that you're attacking, and then rip through the attacking side and try to pin the back of that blocker like we saw in the first clip on the pull and club. Epenesa is so effective with this move that it opens up a lot of variation inside, whether or not he chooses to use it or not. Because when you watch him play, you'll notice in a lot of situations and passing downs or passing situations period, you'll notice a lot of tackles oversetting, despite the fact that, according to some, Epenesa lacks that great explosion. Another aspect of Epenesa's game that I think really defines him is his motor. And I get it. I'm sure about 80% of you all just gave me a giant eye roll, and I get it. It's something that gets thrown out a lot every single year during the draft cycle, and it's not a sexy trait. But here's the thing. There are a lot of guys in the league right now who are recording a lot of tackles for loss and a lot of sacks and a lot of tackles, and you're seeing that on the stat sheet and thinking, they're busting it up behind the line, they're blowing up the play. And the reality is there are a lot of cleanup sacks or elongated stops on plays that just weren't going anywhere. But somebody has to get them right. And also nowadays, offenses in the NFL, they're all about manufacturing space, spreading out defenses. And that means defenses are going to need linemen and linebackers who aren't going to quit on a play and guys who are willing to bust it out to the flat. I mean, I know for a fact you guys have all seen those shifty offensive skill players, right? When they get out on the outside, they like to throw stutter steps and loop back around and ISO defensive backs like it's 1v1 pickup basketball or something. Defenses need players like Epenesa who are out there working even when the play isn't immediately in front of them. Something that I really just haven't seen anywhere, but is absolutely worth highlighting when you're talking about Epenesa's game, is his run defense. And no, I'm not saying he's an elite level run defender, but he is well above average. And 3 years ago, that would have been seen as such a shocking revelation. The amount of development and improvement shown by Epenesa in the run game over the past 3 seasons is such a testament to what he does behind the scenes and his work ethic. That's something I've always believed, that if a player is continually getting better year after year in a certain area, obviously they're putting in the work that we can't see. And that's honestly the real reason I'm listing this as a strength. So instead of run defense, maybe just call it like run defense development or something. And given Epenesa's physical gifts like length and power, he was the perfect test case to see how he could use that great foundation to improve technically and cognitively against the run, and it's been such a fun progression to watch. Epenesa does a really fine job at getting out of that one-track pass rushing mindset by staying aware, keeping his head up, using his eyes, and gaining that initial control on more often than not, and using his power and length. And in that position, Epenesa does a phenomenal job at playing both running lanes and shedding. All right, we might as well just get this one out of the way. As far as weaknesses go, Epenesa's hips do stand out as being a little bit tight, specifically when coming around the edge, which I really want to be an important distinction in Epenesa's case. But before we go any further, everyone always is throwing out the word bend, but I think it's important to understand what the importance of bend actually is, so let's talk about it. Take a play like this, for example. Here, if Epenesa were to just sink his hips when turning the corner and bend in order to take a more direct line to the quarterback instead of just looping around the way he does here, he more than likely is going to disrupt this throw in some capacity. And it probably doesn't result in a completion or a first down, to be honest. And the thing here is that Epenesa beat his guy. And he had a clear window to make a sharper cut, and he just couldn't do it or didn't do it. And, if you take that sharper cut, he's going to get to that quarterback at least a second sooner. There are times where Epenesa truly displays some quality bend for a person his size, and even times where he's able to unlock his hips on stunts, and he looks very fluid sometimes when he drops into coverage. You can clearly see that. Whether it's a matter of him just fully trusting his movement or a true lack of flexibility is something that I just can't definitively sit here and tell you, but the stiffness and the lack of showing to drop his hips is something that really shows up a lot with Epenesa, even on plays where the end result is actually a positive. And let me be clear, finishing plays, no matter how you get there, is always going to be a plus. I'm not going to argue against that, obviously. But the question is, are all of his big plays translatable to the next level when you adjust for a higher level athletes on the offensive line and just better all around QB play overall? It'll be really interesting to watch moving forward whether or not Epenesa will be able to clean up some of those issues in the fluidity department, because you just don't often see drastic changes in that area. And although it's not the end-all be-all, it's without question a very beneficial trait to have if you're going to be a pass rusher in the NFL. The next thing I want to touch on that I think Epenesa could really stand to improve at, and it does tie a little bit into his issues with flexibility, are his counter moves when rushing the passer. You know, the things we've talked about already, like Epenesa's powerful base, his use of length, his swipe moves, and his technical yet violent hands are all really great things to build on for a really nice pass rush. But he needs to develop that arsenal of secondary moves or finisher moves to finish off a play or when his initial move gets stopped. You know, think of it as a UFC fight. You're down in the final round of the fight, you have your opponent on his heels with some really nice jabs, but you don't know how to finish your opponent because you don't know how to throw any combinations. You know, you're just banking on throwing jabs to get the job done and knocking your opponent out, and that might work against lesser fighters, but not against guys who are at the highest level of their game after decades of refining their skill set. With Epenesa, I see so many opportunities for a pull move on the end of bull rushes or arm overs, and also some really nice, great potential for spin moves and swim moves. And this is definitely something that in the next few seasons, I hope we'll see a lot more of, and fingers crossed that he ends up in a positive situation to make developing these things a little bit easier. The last thing I want to touch on as a weakness regarding who Epenesa is as a player, and I want to be clear, this has nothing to do with what I think of him from an evaluation perspective, is that Epenesa's size and athletic profile make him somewhat of a tweener or a guy without a truly defined position. In an ideal world, this isn't an issue for anybody, but it's not an ideal world. And the reality is that coaching turnover in the NFL happens every single offseason. You know, regimes go in, regimes go out, and players who don't have that easily defined role right out of the gate might not fit the vision of a different regime. In my opinion, with a little bit of body transformation, you can line up Epenesa all over the line on any down and utilize him to rush the passer, two gap, doesn't matter. However, the unfortunate reality about being a tweener prospect is that it also increases the likelihood of a team messing up. That's just the unfortunate reality of it. To put guys like Epenesa in position to be successful in their careers, it's going to take a well thought out plan from the get-go on draft night or when you draft him, you know, to get the most out of his game. And although that doesn't affect how I personally evaluate his game, it's just an interesting thing to consider as a viewer as he continues his professional career. At the start of his playing career at Iowa, A.J. Epenesa was nothing more than a pass rusher, but 3 seasons later, he has come a long way in refining his game to become a guy who can get after the passer with consistency, he can play the run, he can create turnovers, and he does that while really never coming off the field. Epenesa already has really great power, and he has great length, and he has great hand usage, and you're looking at a guy who I honestly think can contribute year one, as well as a guy who comes with a tremendous upside if the right plan is put in place. With all that said, my final grade for A.J. Epenesa is going to be mid-first round, and I'd be surprised if he doesn't come off the board in the first round as well. Also, just as a bonus, everybody loves a good pro comparison, and honestly, people get really tight about them sometimes, but who cares? They're fun, so I'm going to do it. If there's a current NFL player that Epenesa really reminds me of, it's Arik Armstead from the San Francisco 49ers. Epenesa and Armstead both play a little bit high, they both win with length, and they both win with power, and I think Epenesa could really slot into a similar role in the NFL, where he gets lined up in a variety of different spots, he can rush the passer, he can play the run, and yeah, Armstead might be a little bit more twitched up than Epenesa, but when you talk about hand usage, Epenesa is far superior, especially when you compare them as prospects, which is what I'm doing. And I know there's about a 10-pound weight difference between them, maybe even like 15 pounds. But when you account for the 2-inch height difference, pound for pound, they're pretty similar. And also, Epenesa may be shorter, but he's actually longer. I would like to personally thank all of you for checking out today's video. And if you would like to see more of these in the future, please be sure to like and subscribe. And also, I would really love it if you guys could leave a comment. The interaction portion is always my favorite part of making these videos. And with that said, I hope you all have a good one.